Well, namaskar everyone. So let us start the third day. It's interesting to see, to note that Sri Krishna's Bhagavad Gita, the song divine, and Sri Aurobindo's, the life divine, were both given to humanity in the war period. One was, as you know, during the Kurukshetra war, and the other during the First World War. So you see, this is again another proof that great mysteries, deep secrets of life can be given during these times of crisis. Both the times there was a crisis of human consciousness, and yet both of them gave us the secrets of the Sanatana Dharma. And that's what I told you in the beginning, that I would be covering 5 major spiritual mysteries. That of the mystery of the soul, the mystery of birth, the mystery of death, the mystery of rebirth and karma, and then the mystery of our own planet Earth. So today we will take up the mystery of the soul. And from now on, as I did before, my method would be to select a few verses from the Bhagavad Gita as translated by Sri Aurobindo, and then I will be expanding them. As I said, the Bhagavad Gita and Sri Aurobindo's The Life Divine are very close to each other in a way. The Gita has got the seed ideas of the mystery of spiritual life, and Sri Aurobindo expands them, explains them, adding more dimensions to it. So it's but natural that I seek explanations of the Bhagavad Gita from Sri Aurobindo's, majorly the Life Divine, and other works. So the very first verse from the Bhagavad Gita is from chapter 15, verse number 7. It is an eternal portion of me. Lord Krishna says, it is an eternal portion of me that becomes the jiva in the world of living creatures and cultivates the subjective powers of Prakriti, mind, and the 5 senses. We have lots of verses, quite many verses on the nature of soul, but this I thought is the most fundamental one, where Sri Krishna is telling that this individual soul in the creation is a partial manifestation of me, Mamaiva Amsha. He says, Mamaiva Amsho Jiva Loka Jiva Bhutam Sanatana. So that phrase, Mamaiva Amsha, is the most important thing to note. That is to say, that each soul, each being in its spiritual reality is the very divine. However partial is its actual manifestation of human nature. So this is the first concept you should understand, that this soul within the human being is a direct descent from the Supreme. Whatever the Supreme reality you may call, Sachidananda or the Purushottama or the Divine. But the only thing is, it's a partial in its actual manifestation. Because this is an individual self, whereas the Supreme is the Supreme Oneness. So in each of the many, we have this eternal individual, the eternal unborn and undying power of the one existence. And Lord Krishna calls it Jiva. And that's the term that we need to clarify a little later. But what he says is that this Jiva, it appears here as if a living creature in a world of living creatures. That's what Lord Krishna himself says, in the world of living creatures, and cultivates the subjective powers of Prakriti. This descent of the soul comes down into the living creatures. But what's the meaning of these living creatures? We'll develop that as we go along. But this has become an individual jiva, but actually it can become something much greater than mental man in its future. And when this soul rises above all ignorant limitation, then it puts on its divine nature, of which humanity is only a temporary veil. That's very interesting to know that even this soul that comes into the human being, this is a temporary passing phase for the descent of the soul. Because beyond humanity, souls do develop and reach into their higher self. So this manifestation is only a passing phase in its evolution. So the individual spirit exists and ever existed beyond in the eternal, for it is itself everlasting Sanatana. So this is the first thing that we see about that eternal portion of me, Mamaiva Amsha. I think that's clear to us now. First instance is where Lord Krishna tells us that this is the portion of myself. This is a truth that's more or less accepted only in the Sanatana Dharma. All other religions or philosophies do not accept this, do not conceive of this. They think it's a separate portion, separate creation. But the most important thing, that phrase that we should remember in Sanatana Dharma, is that the soul is a Mamaiva Amsha. It means a lot, we will explain it. Which means that the Divine Himself has become this world. That the Divine Himself is not only the Atman within us, the Jiva within us, but is also this creation of matter and life and plant and animals and birds and everything. So this is fully a manifestation of the Divine, both in the outer world, what we call the Prakriti, and the inner world, where we see what we call the Jiva, or the soul. So that way, the within and the without is only one consciousness, the divine consciousness. Well, I know there are many questions that may crop up in your mind. Why this problem? If inside and outside there's the same divinity, why is there so much cruelty? Why is there corruption? Why is there violence? Why is this ignorance? Well, all these whys will be answered as we go along in the life divine. Because Sri Aurobindo has taken great care to answer all these questions of life. That's why it's a voluminous book of 600 to 700 pages. So that's why we can see all your questions can be answered if we approach the life divine. However, to go further with the Gita, there is in the same chapter 15:8, verse number 8, chapter 15. It says, when the Lord takes up this body, see the wordings, when the Lord takes up this body, when that means the Supreme Lord takes up this body, He brings in him the mind and the senses. And in his going forth too, casting away the body, he goes taking them as the wind takes the perfumes from a vase. A very poetic touch. I mean, these are the things that we should note in this great moment of philosophy and depth of the spirituality. Sri Krishna brings a beautiful literary touch that as the wind, he goes taking them as the wind takes the perfumes from a vase. A poetic way to say that when the Lord comes down into this body as the Jiva, he brings with him the mind, the senses, etc. And then when the soul leaves the body, then all these things are taken away. Well, this is a poetic phrase on which I will be giving a full talk later on, tomorrow or day after, I don't know. That is the journey of the soul beyond death. What happens, how does it go, etc. Well, for the present, let it be that we have this question of the Lord himself going out. So this Lord himself, the Ishvara, who by virtue of the eternal multiplicity of his oneness, is not all existence a rendering of the truth of the infinite? Exists forever as the immortal soul within us, and has taken up this body and goes forth from the transient framework when it is cast away to disappear into the elements of nature. There's another new word that has come in. The Lord, the Ishvara. Normally we have called the divine, the God, etc. the Ishvara and Shakti. But those are philosophic terms. But what is interesting, Sri Aurobindo tells us is that this immortal soul within us is nothing but the divine. So he comes in, he goes out. What does it imply? That when he comes in, he means either the Jiva or the Lord or the Ishvara or the Jiva, Jivatman soul, whatever it is. That is called the birth. Birth is not what we say physically when the mother delivers the baby. That's a physical birth. But the true birth is the birth of the soul in the body. And then when it leaves, it takes away, he goes away. But then he brings with him and cultivates for the enjoyments of the objects of mind and sense the subjective powers of Prakriti. This is something again very interesting. That when the soul incarnates in a body, it brings its own mind, its own senses, its own vital capacities, instruments as we say. So it is as if the soul is coming up on a journey onto the earth, and it brings with it all the paraphernalia, all the instrumentation that it requires for that particular birth and that particular experience upon earth. And when I said the particular experience upon earth, we need to clarify a little more. That it comes upon earth because there the growth is the only growth that is upon earth. There is a progressive development of our conscious being towards a supreme recovery of unity with God and with all in God. So again we are going to the next point. It has come upon earth, it is taking a body upon earth. Please remember the word earth. Because the soul progresses, experiences, develops, evolves only upon earth. Not upon any other planet that we have got so many planets around. Not on any sun or moon or anything. And that's what we will see in our last talk. What is the speciality of the earth? However, this point to be noted, it comes into the body, it comes upon earth, and because earth is the only place where it can develop and evolve. It also throws in a side light that once it leaves earth, the soul, the jiva, it has no more progress. It cannot progress further. It just withdraws, retreats to its own world. So it is crucial that we, the human beings, live out our life meaningfully. What is that word, meaningfully? Is what we have explained in the first two talks, when Sri Krishna tells us how to live this life with detachment. And then, as we concluded yesterday's talk, all our movements should be Godward and with God consciousness, God love, God service. That is the summum bonum of this meaning of life, because that is why it is there upon earth. And then we see that the question of, I told you what is the meaning of the jiva. Now I'll go a little more philosophically, terminology is philosophical. The word jiva, says Sri Aurobindo, has two meanings in the Sanskritic tongues. Living creatures, jiva means living creatures, and the spirit individualized and upholding the living being in its evolution from birth to birth. In the latter sense, the full term is Jivatma, the Atman, spirit or eternal self of the living being. It is spoken of figuratively by the Gita as an eternal portion of the divine. So we understood, because normally we make this mistake, Jiva, and then we say Jivatman. What is the difference? Jiva is nothing but a living creature in the ordinary language, the common language. But on the spiritual level, this jiva is that eternal portion, the evolution which takes evolution, which goes from birth to birth. It's called the spirit or eternal self of the living being. So let's not confuse jiva and jivatman. Jiva is the common terminology. Jivatman is that inner spiritual being, is a portion of the divine. And then we see the question of, one more step we have to take, that is jiva, jivatman, and then we say the word central being is that which is not born. Now here comes a little difference. Sri Aurobindo takes us away from the Gita and comes and explains in his own terms. Now what is it? The central being is that which is not born, does not evolve, but presides over all the individual manifestation. The psychic is its projection here. For the psychic being is in the evolution and from within supports our whole evolution. It receives the essence of all experience and by that develops the personality Godward. So suddenly we see a new word, the psychic being. So what is the new word? He says here, there is a central being which is the soul, which is not born. What Lord Krishna tells us is exactly this. That's what I was referring to. Sri Krishna says in chapter 2, verse 20, this is not born, nor does it die, nor is it a thing that comes into being once and passing away will never come into being again. It is unborn, ancient, sempiternal. It is not slain with the slaying of the body. The embodied soul casts away old and takes up new bodies as a man changes worn out raiment for new. This is verse 20 and 22. But these are the essential ideas about the soul. That it is not born, does not die, and it keeps coming again and again. It is unborn, ancient, sempiternal. but also it casts away the old and takes up new bodies. These are the two new ideas. But here, what I said just now, Sri Aurobindo makes a little different path, in the sense that it brings in greater clarity. Since when Lord Krishna says that it is the soul does not die, is not born, it comes back again. Sri Aurobindo says, no, we have to make a little difference. That is, what we have here, the central being is what we mean in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, the soul. So the soul is not born, does not evolve, that's true. But as Sri Krishna says, the soul comes from birth to birth and goes on, takes a new body. But here Sri Aurobindo says, in fact, it is a psychic being. Psychic is in the evolution and from within supports our whole evolution. So there is now a little distinction between the soul and the psychic being. So what is this psychic being? We will see. As the mother would explain, it is necessary to understand clearly the difference between the evolving soul, the psychic being, and the pure Atman, self or spirit. The pure self is unborn, does not pass through death or birth, is independent of birth or body, mind or life, or this manifested nature. Is not bound by these things, not limited, not affected, even though it assumes and supports them. The soul, on the contrary, is something that comes down into birth and passes through death. Although it does not die, it is immortal from one state to another, from the earth plane to other planes and back again to the earth existence. It goes on with this progression from life to life through an evolution which leads it up to the human state and evolves through it all a being of itself, which we call the psychic being. So here is the full explanation. That the psychic being is the one that comes into evolution into our human body. But is it wrong to say the soul has come into a human body? Does the Lord Krishna say that it is the psychic, it is the soul that comes in and takes up this body? But there is no contradiction. It's only a clarification. What is it? That the soul comes in. The central being is the being which presides over the different births, one after the other, but is itself unborn. For it does not descend into the being, but is above. So let me summarize. The soul, the central being, remains above the individual, whereas the psychic being is a being that comes within. So he says, it holds together the mental, the vital, the physical, and all the various parts of the personality, and it controls the life either through the mental being and the mental thought. So the soul is a presiding deity, with what you say, where the psychic being is the involved divine consciousness. So now it becomes clearer that when the human being takes birth, the soul comes in, no doubt. But it is not the soul that experiences the experiences of this life. It is the psychic being that experiences what all I'm passing through a particular life. So we can say in a way that the soul is directly in contact with this manifestation. That means our life, our suffering, our enjoyment, our work, our prayers, our pujas, everything, it's a psychic being which is in contact. The soul is only a kind of a presiding deity. It doesn't evolve itself. It doesn't involve itself. Nor does it grow. It's an eternal being, the Jivatman, what the Lord says, Mamaiva Amsha. It's there. It doesn't evolve. It doesn't get into this creation. It doesn't get into this evolutionary process. So Sri Aurobindo brings in this new concept, Sri Aurobindo and the mother, of course, They have dealt a lot on this. So now for Sri Aurobindo's terminology, we see that it is a psychic being which is responsible for all this contact. When we say I want to contact my soul, it only means that I want to contact my psychic being. So that is where the yoga comes in. That's why in Sri Aurobindo's and Mother's works, you'll always say this, they say, contact your psychic being. They don't say it's contact your soul. Because this psychic being is the one that really tries to guide us. You see, now I'll tell you the next explanation. What happens is that the psychic being guides our day-to-day life. Yeah. It's a psychic being that guides our day-to-day life. And what is it that we want in our life? To be guided by a divine spiritual entity. So there is a little shift in Gita Yoga and Integral Yoga. Gita is a very generic amorphous term called the soul, the Atman or the Jivatman. But in Sri Aurobindo it says, what we call Chaitya is Jivatma, psychic being, is the Chaitya Purusha in Sanskrit. Is the Chaitya Purusha, and then we have the Jivatman. So Chaitya Purusha is the equation of psychic being. And it's this Chaitya Purusha who is deep within us, behind layers and layers of beings. Because the outer being, we call it, is the mind, life and body. What normally we see, we know our mind and our emotions, our vital, and we know our body. But the psychic has nothing to do with that. It is the kind of the outermost layer, if we can say, of the human body, of the human personality. Behind this outer being, there is this subliminal being, consisting of the inner mind, the inner vital, inner physical, or we can say the subtle mind, subtle physical, subtle mind, subtle emotions. And behind the subtle is a layer, again, of the Annamaya Purusha, Pranamaya Purusha, Manomaya Purusha. And then further down, behind these three Purushas, is the chamber of the psychic being. So now we see the exact position of the psychic being. If you were to draw a graph, you can draw a graph like that. The 6 layers, the 3 layers, the outer being, 3 layers of the subtle physical, 3 layers of the Purusha, and then within is the psychic being, and above the psychic being is the soul. That is the real complex human personality. It is not just easy to say the psychic is within me. It is in a way far, far within us. That's why it's so very difficult, because we have to cross so many doors. When we go to the temple, to the Garbhagriha, we have to cross many a door. So each of these layers, each of these differences, each of these divisions is a kind of a door. So we have to go through all these doors before we can contact the psychic being. But at the same time, the psychic also is trying in its own way to influence the mind, the body, the emotions. And in fact, when we see nature, we have the touch of beauty, we have the touch of joy, we have the touch of compassion. These are nothing but the touches of the psychic being. Yesterday we said, when you reject a desire, you experience the psychic touch. So it's not that the psychic being is locked up in a chamber, is not unapproachable. From its own side, it's trying to come out and lead your mind, influence your mind, An artist sees a sense of beauty, a musician has a lovely experience of music. So these are the touches of the psychic being. That is why we say, try to practice these higher emotions, the higher vital, which are music and dance and painting and looking at a beautiful sky, where there is no influence of the lower level. That means the lower jealousies and angers and passions and greed and all that. So when this lower murk, the mud is not there, then the psychic being can influence your higher life. That is where all our music and painting and prayers and we go to the temple. This is where the psychic has a better chance to come out into the life. So this is the importance, where the soul itself says, I have nothing to do with your emotions or with your actions. I have given my charge to the psychic being. You are with it. So that is the position of the psychic being. But then there is one more thing that we need to say about the psychic being itself. Now, Mother has given us a wonderful description of what is the psychic being. Of course, we have said it is a delegate of the soul within evolution. But she has given a more graphic picture. She says the psychic is like the wire between the generator and the lamp. It's like a wire. What is the generator and what is the lamp? Or rather, who is the generator and who is the lamp? The divine is the generator, and the body, the visible being, is the lamp. The function then of the psychic is to connect the two. In other words, if there were no psychic in matter, matter could not come in direct contact with the divine. You see the beautiful structure of this universe. We are not left alone in our suffering and pain and sorrow. In fact, in this world of ignorance, the divine has taken great compassion. And then he has himself descended as a psychic being. And if we say it is the psychic being is the wire between the generator, the divine, and us, the body, so you can imagine if this body, this suffering and pain has to go, has to vanish, has to dwindle, has to lessen, what do? We had to connect with the generator. And for this, the wire must be there. You see, if we do not have the wire between the generator and the lamp inside your house, you have no light. So the wiring is important. And this wire is a direct contact of the Supreme Divine with us, the human beings. And what is this direct contact? Why is it there? Is it only for you and me? No. In fact, the very purpose of the psychic being in creation, in the human beings, is to transform. Transform what? Not just our emotions, our mind, but the most important work of the psychic being is to transform matter. That is why, since the time eternal, what we say, the sempiternal, the soul first descended into matter, because the soul is again the same thing. It is a direct link, or rather I would say it's the direct descent of the divine into matter. So matter is not something dead without consciousness. It's you and me, we cannot connect with that consciousness, but it's fully alive with the consciousness of the divine, what we call the soul. The soul is there in matter too. Why did it come into matter? because it wanted to bring in light, bring in divine consciousness into matter itself. So it's not just that we, the human beings, are privileged to have the psychic being. The soul is there even in matter. And in matter it takes thousands and thousands of rounds of births, and slowly the soul comes to the level of life and then comes to the level of animals. And then at a stage it comes to the level of the human beings. So when it comes to the level of the human beings, we make this distinction between the soul and the psychic being. Why do we make the distinction suddenly? Because now the psychic being has a definite form. The soul does not have a form of its own. It's more like a penumbra, it's more like a luminosity, more like a circle of light. An increasing light, maybe what is there in matter, is much more illuminated and powerful as it grows in the scale of evolution. But when it comes to man, it suddenly takes upon a form. That is why the story goes in the Upanishads that when man was created, the form is so good that the gods said, we will enter. So man is that special being in which the psychic being is more conscious. Conscious of what? Conscious of its journey, conscious of its aim. Because that is the only special entity in man. Otherwise the physical, the emotions, the impulses, our lower nature, all is there common with the animals. There is nothing different between the animals and us except the psychic being. If you say no, we have the mental consciousness, no, there is a rudimentary of mental consciousness in the animals too. And in fact, there is a rudimentary of the psychic being also in the flowers. So nature has tried already this touch of the psychic being, touch of the mind in the lower creatures in the scale of evolution. That is why the flowers are so very open and receptive to the light. And then that's why the mother has given us the hundreds of flowers names, which are psychologically influencing the human being, because they have the touch of the psychic being. And then the psychic being is so very unique speciality to the human being that it is not only to the human beings, but mother would go further, says, even for the earth. Earth is the only place in this entire creation where there is the psychic being. In fact, I would say that because of the psychic being, the earth becomes an exceptional creation in this entire, Milky Way, you may call it. And in this entire Milky Way, the human being is the most exceptional. In fact, it is so exceptional that Mother clarifies that even the gods, demigods, goddesses, they are jealous, envious of these human beings. Because the gods and the goddesses and the demigods do not have the psychic being. It's only the human beings. So you can see the human beings are in a spiritual way, on the spiritual level, a greater potential than the gods and the goddesses. Have a greater potential. Of course, at present, we are more in the darker, ignorant, lower nature. But that is what Sri Aurobindo and the Mother talk about when we speak about the evolutionary prospect. That in this evolution, human beings, if they can do this march of evolution of consciousness, they can reach beyond the gods. It's difficult to believe for us human beings who are so accustomed to the gods and goddesses. We have this puja, we have Durga puja, we have Navratri, we have Ganesh puja, we have all these pujas. But a day will come, a time will come, when the human beings, at least the representative ones, the stalwarts, the avant-garde, and even as a race, not the entire race, but there will be what Aurobindo calls the supramental race. A race beyond the human being, a race that is fully governed by the psychic being, a race that does not have the shadow of ignorance. So at that time, we will have a transformed body, a transformed consciousness, a transformed mind, a transformed emotion. And that supramental being is the one who stands above the gods and goddesses. So this is the evolutionary prospect that Aurobindo tells us. And therefore he says that human beings are the most privileged. But even, the asuras don't have the psychic being also. But it seems the gods, some of them, they come down to the human beings in order to experience this psychic being. Because they do not want to take the human forms. They just say, let me get into a human being and experience what it is like to be in contact with the psychic being. But the asuras, no, they say, no, we don't want the psychic being. We are very happy in our life, on our status. So that is one of the differences between the gods, the asuras and the daivas. That the daivic people, the gods and goddesses, they even descend into human beings, sometimes possess them only in order to experience the touch of the psychic being. Unfortunately, the mother says in a sad note, we have such a great gem within us called the psychic being. I mean, this multi-dimensional, beautiful, radiating gem. But we have no value for it. We are so much in search of the gems outside. Little pearl that you have, this decorate your neck and your ears and your being. We go after the outside gems or the outside pearls, outside gold. But she said in a sad way that human beings do not give value, even the value to that initial, their great gem that they carry within. Is quite a tragedy. That's the real tragedy of the human beings. Not the outer tragedies of losing money, losing profession, losing this, losing that. But having all that, if we do not think of the real gem that we carry, which is the exclusive prerogative of all the creatures upon earth, is the exclusive prerogative of the human beings. But we are the most unfortunate creatures upon earth because we don't even look at it, we do not even value it. That's the problem with the question of the soul and the psychic being. And then we see, what does it mean? Sri Krishna has another beautiful sentence here, a verse in fact. One of the verses, he says, whoever leaves his body, that is chapter 8, verse number 5 and 6. Now, talking about the soul, I thought I should even cover this portion. Whoever leaves his body and departs remembering me at his time of end comes to my bhava, that of the Purushottama, my status of being. There is no doubt of that. Verse number 6. Whosoever at the end abandons the body, thinking upon any form of being, to that form he attains, O Kaunteya, into which the soul was at each moment growing inwardly during the physical life. That's what we forget. And most often we say, oh no, at the time of death, whatever you think, it will happen to you next life. But we have not noted the last phrase. He says, into which the soul was at each moment growing inwardly during the physical life. So you see, what is important is the last phrase, that is not just to have a dying wish, as it is said. In fact, Sri-Aurobindo does explain that this dying wish has nothing to do with this mental thing. I read out a passage from him, a letter from him. The psychic being choice at the time of death does not work out the next formation of personality. What does it work out? Does not work out the next formation of personality, it fixes it. Now we need to have a clarity in that. Because I've heard many people explaining at the time of death, the soul wishes something and that's the next birth is that. When it enters the psychic world, it begins to assimilate the essence of its experience, and by that assimilation is formed the future psychic personality in accordance with the fixation already made. In fact, Sri-Aurobindo directly refers to this. He says, but it is not a deathbed remembrance at variance with or insufficiently prepared by the whole tenor of our life and our past subjectivity that can have this saving power. Many people have told us that there is this deathbed remembrance. But Sri Krishna says that this deathbed remembrance is not sufficient. The thought of the Gita here is not on a par with the indulgences and facilities of popular religion. It has nothing in common with the crude fancies that make the absolution and the last unction of the priest an edifying Christian death after an unedifying profane life, or the precaution or accident of a death in sacred Benares or holy Ganges a sufficient machinery of salvation. The divine subjective becoming on which the mind has to be fixed firmly in the moment of the physical death must have been one into which the soul was at each moment growing inwardly during the physical life. Again, he has given us a very particular incident that in some religions the priest is called, the pope is called, the father is called, saying that he will give the salvation at the moment of death. But it has nothing to do with that kind of a remembrance, deathbed remembrance. Because we need to have lived a proper life. That is the meaning of the inner life. It is not that you can have any nonsensical life, any vital life, any lower life, and any life with ambition and corruption and all that. And then you say, at the moment of death, I will think of the Lord, I will think of God, I will think of my child called Narayana, my child called Krishna. All those things that used to happen in our olden times. So what is important is the whole life itself has to be tuned to a higher life. It is only then that the soul can fix its next life. He says, the mother says here, the dying wish of the man is only something on the surface. It may be determined by the psychic and so help to shape the future, but it does not determine the psychic choice. This is very important. The psychic being does not decide the next life that I will become a carpenter, that next life I will become a painter, that next life. No. It is only, so help to shape the future. That means in what direction the psychic being will take birth. It has nothing to do. We have all these theories of karma. We have a talk on karma. We will see. It's all a kind of a misconception. That I will think that this time I was a poor person, next time I will be a richer person. This time I have done a lot of puja, so I will have a lot of wealth. All that justice is a kind of a, what Sri-Aurobindo would call a kind of a common folklore. There is no spiritual truth. So what we see here is that even at the time of death is only on the surface. Somebody may be there wishing that next life I would want to be. Okay, you can have your prayer saying, I would want to be in this life. But it doesn't give the psychic being the choice, because the psychic choice comes only once it goes back to its realm. Well, we will see that a little later in the next talk. There is something behind the veil. It is not the outer consciousness's action that determines the inner process, but the other way around. Sometimes, however, there are signs of fragments of the inner action that come up on the surface. Some people have a vision or remembrance of the circumstance of their past in a panoramic flash at the time of death. There is a psychic's review of the life before departing. Well, some people have also asked the question, this is quite a common phenomenon, that people on the deathbed, they suddenly have flashes of their entire life. And then they say, I've lived a life like this, and in my next life I would like it to be there. All that wishful thinking you can have, but it cannot be a contradiction of the way you have lived, and then you say, no, next life I want to be a rich person or a powerful person. No. Our wishes, sweet wishes, do not determine our psychic next birth. So that is where Sri Aurobindo is telling us that we have to live, as Lord Krishna himself says, that whatever life you led in the physical life, that would determine. How does it determine? Say this psychic being wanted to have a life of an artist in this life of mine, in this embodiment. It wanted to be a business person, it wanted to be a kind of an artist, it wanted to be a carpenter, it wanted to be an athlete, whatever the experience it came for. But it could not. It did not. Why? Because of the ambition, because of the mental perversions, because of the vital grip. Because that is why our outer life becomes so very important, so that it can fulfill the choice that soul has come with. So that is the whole meaning, raison d'etre of our life, that what is it that my soul really wants. Well, it may not be so easy at all, I can tell you that. But definitely, if we are a little more open, wide consciousness, there is all the possibility that the soul will gradually come up to say, this is what I have come for, this is the experience. Sometimes it comes for an experience, it has to do the opposite thing, but through time it learns. So that is the question of the life that we have to lead meaningfully, and also in a direction where it helps the soul to fulfill its aim. Because all of us know, we will be covering that in the next talk, that the soul comes with a special purpose. It's not just born, it's not just coming to the womb of the mother and says, okay, I'm in this child. So that's where the whole issue comes in. And now I've just end the whole talk with a beautiful passage from Savitri, which has captured some of these lines and also tells you a bit about Sri Krishna. And of course, Savitri, it has all the phases and the facets, and it's the most marvelous thing you can ever read. All is not here a blinded nature's task. A word, a wisdom watches us from on high. A witness sanctioning her will and works. An eye unseen in the unseeing vast. There is an influence from a light above. There are thoughts remote and sealed eternities. A mystic motive drives the stars and suns. In this passage from a deaf, unknowing force, the struggling consciousness and transient breath, a mighty supernature waits on time. And now look at these lines. The world is other than we now think and see. There's a deeper side of this world. Our lives a deeper mystery than we have dreamed. Those are the mysteries that we are talking about. I mean, how false a life we lead, how superficial a life we lead, all the time thinking of the outer being, outer functions and outer fulfillment. So our lives a deeper mystery than we have dreamed. Our minds are starters in the race to God. Our souls deputed selves of the Supreme. Exactly what Lord Krishna says. This is Maya Vamsha. It says the souls are deputed selves of the Supreme. Across the cosmic field, through narrow lanes, asking a scanty dole from fortune's hands, and garbed in beggar's robes, there walks the One. You say the One Supreme can walk in beggar's robe. He is there in a beggar's robe, or in the rich man, or in the poor man. For the Lord, there is no difference. Even in the theatre of these small lives, behind the act a secret sweetness breathes, an urge of miniature divinity. A mystic passion from the wells of God flows through the guarded spaces of the soul. A force that helps, supports the suffering earth, an unseen nearness and a hidden joy. There are muffled throbs of laughter's undertones, the murmur of an occult happiness, an exultation in the depths of sleep, a heart of bliss within a world of pain. An infant nursed on nature's covered breast, an infant playing in the magic woods, fluting to rapture by the spirit streams, awaits the hour when we shall turn to his call. Obviously the call of the Sri Krishna. Obviously the call of the divine within. So in this tremendous life, with all these things happening, somebody is waiting for us to listen to his call. There is the higher dimension, there's higher possibilities, there's something above which is always guiding us. But we unfortunately are blind, do not want to hear. In fact, I will end here with a personal talk of mine with the mother. Once when I was there with the mother on one of my birthdays, she was explaining to me about the purpose of life. And then she explained to me saying, Anand, people are born, whatever manner, through aspiration or by accident or whatever. She didn't say that, but people are born, they grow up, they get educated, they grow up, and then they get married. They get a job, they get settled in life. But then when the soul says, look at me, we are all so busy with the mental development, with the vital development, with the emotional development, with making a family richer, with making a house better. All the time we are so engaged with the outer world. She says, sometimes the soul says, look at me. But we have no time to look at the soul or to even to hear the call of the soul. Because what is it? We think that when we grow up, when we have got settled down with his grandchildren and they're all in America or Germany or Europe or London or wherever, we think once the grandchildren are settled, then I'll have all the time to focus and concentrate and dedicate to the divine. But then she said, at that time, what do you have to give to the divine? Nothing. Maybe you have a bit of bank balance, but the divine doesn't need your bank balance. He needs you. He needs your offering, your mind, your feelings, your body, your emotions, your prayers. But when you are in that age of retirement, what do we have? We have nothing to give to God. We go on a pilgrimage, we do a puja, we do this, we do that, but it's all an empty outer shell. So spirituality, she says, it must begin when one is young. Because when I am young, I am full of the vital energy, the emotional, the physical, the mental, they're all wonderful, bubbling with energy and emotion and consciousness. So that is what is to be given up, surrendered, what Sri Krishna would tell us in the end. Manmana bhava madbhakta madhyaji mam namaskuru. Well, it is not so easy, I know. Even Sri Krishna gives this in the end of the Bhagavad Gita. Because he knows Arjuna has to be prepared. Why is it that Sri Krishna does not tell this right in the beginning? It could have been told. But we have to go through the experiences of life. So that is what the mother explained to me, saying that spirituality must begin when one is young. This is what our youngsters do not understand. Why youngsters? Why do you blame the young? Even all of us, nobody here, that we are there together. We go through the passions of life, the ups and downs, the suffering, sorrow, pain, the adjustment, settlement, everything. But even when you retire nowadays, there's no freedom, there's no peace. You look after your grandchildren, you look after their problems, you look after more grandchildren, and blah, 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 it goes on. That's why, in a way, our ancient Indian system was good. After Vanaprastha, you took a sannyas. You don't have to go back to grandchildren, settling them and getting them to education, getting them married. They said, no, I have nothing to do with my Vanaprastha, it's over. I'm cut off from society, from children, from business, from everything. At least you have some time for your inner self. But now we don't have any time even for our inner self, even when we grow up. So this was, of course, I've developed the mother's talk, based on mother's talk, I'm telling you. But the sad note was the same thing that we are saying here, that we do not have time. That as the mother said, we do not value the inner thing. The same way, we are so busy earning and living that we have no time to look at ourselves. That is the story of the soul. But then there's more to come. Why are we born? How are we born? All that will take us. But today I've just told you an outline of the soul, an outline of the psychic concept, a little introduction to how do we go towards the psychic being. The path is long, but as we said, these are only classes that I'm taking out some essential key verses from the Gita and expanding them in the light of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. And that's how we will be doing in our next classes also. But this is how I'm covering. At the end of the 8 talks, I saw that I will be covering 18 verses from the Bhagavad Gita, which are the key verses giving us the spiritual mysteries and the direction to our life. Well, we'll stop at that. I don't think you have any questions, because questions, if you have, you write them, but I don't see there's any question. You have to question yourself. There's no more mental clarification. Mother and Sri Aurobindo and Lord Krishna has given us enough to begin to question ourselves. And the most beautiful question is in the Latin, Quo vadis? Quo vadis means, where am I going? Ask that question to ourselves. Thank you.